House will join with me in expressing the hope that the publication of the recent report by the Disclosures Tribunal will represent a turning point for Sergeant Maurice McCabe, his wife Lorraine and his family. I have, since the publication, spoken directly with Maurice to express my personal good wishes for him, Lorraine and his family. No words of mine could describe better than Judge Charleton the great wrongs which were done to Maurice McCabe by those in senior positions on Garda Síochána, and indeed by the prevailing culture. The Tribunal report sets out eloquently and unsparingly the deeply troubling realities we have to confront. Mr. Justice Peter Charleton had an onerous and complex task. He is entitled to the fullest of appreciation for the thorough and indeed expeditious manner in which he did this, and he has discharged his task so fully in the public interest. There are, of course, many issues outlined in the report. Deputies have referred to some of them, and it must now be considered in detail and responded to comprehensively. Above all, we now have an independent and objective assessment of the facts, which was the reason, of course, we in this House decided in the first place to establish the tribunal. On a personal note, I want to acknowledge that Sergeant McCabe has, and did in the past, make clear that he had no criticisms to make of me and how I dealt with the matters in question. His approach, both in November and at the tribunal personally, contrasted greatly with what I experienced in the Dáil in November, and indeed in the responses from some political parties more recently. I can live my life quite contentedly without an apology from the deputies involved, but what none of us should stand for is an attempt to rewrite facts. For too long, some of the matters at the centre of this report have been approached by others on the basis of what they choose to believe and assert, rather than what facts had been established. Some deputies were willing to pay more attention to what is described in the report as snippets of information. More deputies piled in when details of the serious mistakes in Tusla emerged, implying that Garda Síochána must have been involved. And Minister Sapone will address some of those issues later. A very understandable concern at how Sergeant McCabe was treated sometimes set at naught the right of others to a good name. As I said in the Dáil, we were in danger of trying to remedy one injustice by creating others. I believe that that is something we all need to reflect on when considering this report. In this House, we were unwilling to await Judge Charleton looking at these matters, despite the fact that he was doing so at the request of the Oireachtas. The House will remember that I established the Disclosures Tribunal on the 17th of February 17, following receipt of very disturbing information through protected disclosures by a member of Garda Síochána, to me in my capacity as Justice Minister then. I referred that information to Justice Dáil Éireann and requested that he review the allegations of wrongdoing contained in those disclosures. In the light of his inquiries, Justice O'Neill concluded he was not in a position to make a determination on the truth or falsity of the allegation, and that a commission of investigation should be established. And there was extensive discussions here with all deputies on all sides of the House, all spokespersons on justice and so on, and indeed with the McCabe family, and we agreed that we would establish the tribunal. I hope, too, that deputies can accept, in the light of the findings of the Charleton report, the allegations in relation to former Commissioner Noreen O'Sullivan were not upheld. One thing is clear: the thrust of the charges made then was that Commissioner O'Sullivan had tried improperly to undermine Sergeant Maurice McCabe at the O'Higgins Commission, where it was being asserted that he was being treated completely inappropriately and that I or my department or both had either conspired with or acquiesced in that approach. The tribunal finds, in fact, that no such situation requiring intervention by me as a minister occurred before the O'Higgins Commission. The judge also notes that a transcendental situation could have arisen which would have required the Minister or the Attorney-General to intervene. It did not. These allegations have been found by the tribunal to be unsupported by evidence. The tribunal did not find any evidence that the former Commissioner was party to the calumny visited upon Sergeant McCabe, or indeed any wrongdoing in her part in relation to Superintendent Taylor. I do want to take this opportunity to thank her for what I experienced when working with her, that is her hard work and dedication to Garda Síochána. Her position was called into question here because it was alleged to have happened to the O'Higgins Commission, which it now transpires did not happen at all. I know the personal and family toll which unsubstantiated allegations can bring. Of course, I am pleased on a personal level that I was found to have acted appropriately, used my judgment well, and that my evidence has been accepted as truthful. While by last November I had moved from the Department of Justice and Equality Judge Charleton found that the Department acted quite properly in relation to the Commission. In fact, there are many dedicated public servants at the Department of Justice, notwithstanding the changes and the reforms that have been recommended. What is deeply worrying is politicians using the shelter of Parliament to defame public servants. Had someone done this outside the House, legal recourse would have been possible and predictable. But inside the withdrawal, it is untouchable but printable. Unsupported defamation is walked into our national press, wrapped in the cloak of Dáil privilege. Defamation laundering is not what this privilege was designed for. It is tempting to jump to conclusions in complex situations, but in both politics and the media, this must be tempered by respect for facts and due process. Equally, in taking measures such as the establishment of the tribunal itself, I have always had to have regard to the rights of both those making the allegations and those against whom allegations have been made. Those who think that due process and fair procedure can be cast aside for reasons of political expediency, I believe do a disservice to the values of our democracy. And I believe the public see right through this. And my experience in the last year suggests strongly to me that the public are very clear about this. I make these points not to engage in any recriminations, but to suggest that we all, both inside and outside the House, need to reflect on how in some instances what was in effect fake news came to be accepted as true and acted on to the detriment of others. A Justice Minister cannot assume the truth of all allegations which have been made against others without having those been objectively assessed and everyone involved being treated with basic fairness. The seriousness of allegation, or indeed their constant repetition, as if they were established fact, doesn't affect that fundamental point in this House. When allegations of wrongdoing are made, they need to be investigated fully and impartially, and that's exactly what Judge Charleton has done. While, of course, not all such allegations warrant the establishment of a tribunal of inquiry, we need to accept that the established methods of investigation, such as GSOC being ably led by Justice Mary Ellen Ring, or indeed the Police Authority being led by Josephine Feely, and indeed the various recommendations that have now been made in the Commission of Policing, that these are appropriate places for various issues to be examined. Of course, we need to look at what improvements can be made in those bodies, what supports we can give them, how we can help them to do their work better. But I do think it's an important principle in this House that we rely on independent investigation of these matters by those equipped to carry them out. Political play acting should have no part in dealing with such serious issues. I've no doubt also that many good members of An Garda Síochána will be very disheartened by what is in the report, and we do need to make a clear distinction between the bad behaviour of a few members, however senior, and the excellent work done by many members of An Garda Síochána. As Justice Minister, I recognise that while An Garda Síochána had generally served us well, serious problems, some of which the deputies here have referred to, do beset the organisation, and Judge Charleton is very clear about those. I think anyone reading his report and his discussion of what the role of An Garda Síochána should be will be very impressed. I do want to congratulate Commissioner Drew Harris on his appointment. I note that yesterday he said the findings of Justice Peter Charleton are a clarion call for action. He said cultural change, which is so necessary in Garda Síochána, comes from behavioural change. He said his senior team will lead this, including emphasising the code of conduct. He also said there should be intervention for poor performance involving support, supervision and extra training. He said in cases of serious misconduct, where your trust in an individual is entirely broken, then they have no place in the organisation. I think we would all agree with that, and I think he recognises the scale of the challenges which he faces, and I hope that the House will support his work and the work of Minister Charles Flanagan and the Department in moving forward the reforms. Mr Justice Charleton makes a point which is very central, and that was the leaking of a protected disclosure to the Oireachtas and the media. Those who were the subject of these allegations had little or no opportunity to respond. The concept of the presumption of innocence is fundamental to our legal system. The leaking of this information, made in accordance with the Protected Disclosure Act 2014, was an abuse of this Act, which was introduced to protect genuine whistleblowers from reporting what they reasonably believed to be genuine wrongs. And of course, we have to support whistleblowers who are attempting to bring various issues to light. I do believe that we must act on the lessons from Judge Charleton's report, and the extensive reforms which are underway should greatly assist in avoiding such dark episodes in the future.